You're listening to the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. Now here's your hosts, Kevin, Derek, and Alex.
All right, welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. I am Derek, and joined as always by your co-hosts, Kevin and Alex. Gentlemen, how we doing?
Doing good, man. It is the Olympics are past us, so
sadly,
is it though?
If it wasn't that, I couldn't just flip on the TV and watch some random sport for an hour and a half.
Yeah. The Olympics are past us. Football is upon us. We have our first full week of preseason games underneath us, and it is draft season, ladies and gentlemen. So this is glorious, for lack of a better term. The next 3 weeks is my probably favorite 3-week stretch of the entire year because I am a draftaholic. I am not seeking any sort of treatment or counsel for it. There's nothing that you can say or do that make me want to do that. I just am what I am, and God loves me for it. Therefore, I like to do it a lot. So, yes. So I love the draft.
Live your truth.
Exactly. Like, I love the draft. I love everything about it. The strategy, the steals, the snipes, the pivots, all the things, the different sorts of strategies, which we will be talking to you guys about tonight, all of it. But I love this time of year, and I love that I get to come on here and hang out with you guys while we talk about some of this stuff. So how are y'all doing?
It's good. There was like actual football, right? There were 16 games. I think every single team was involved in a preseason game this last weekend. And I'm going to tell you, I don't think I watched a live snap of any of it. Just because there is stuff to gain from week 1 preseason, or if you're the Texans or Bears, week 2. But not enough for me yet. I think there's a lot of dudes trying to make teams that we may not see a whole heck of a lot of role players trying to earn roles in week 1. I think in week 2, we see a good dose of the ones for most teams. And I think in week 3, we see a lot of role players trying to earn roles again. So I think that, if there's a weekend to kind of lock in and pay attention to what's going on, I think it is this weekend coming up to see, how some of these teams are going to operate with the ones. We should see at least in years past, you see about a half of the ones, right? You're going to see them open the game. You're going to see them complete, a couple drives each way. And then you might see them start the second half just so that they get a feel for what coming out of the locker room is going to be like in the regular season. And then they're probably shut down from there. But I think this is the weekend to pay attention to see what teams are going to look like, what offenses are going to look like, how some teams might utilize certain players. Obviously, they're not going to show their entire playbook in week 2 of the preseason. They're probably still in a lot of install, but I'll say the point again. This is the weekend to pay attention.
Very good. I'm kind of in the same boat Kevin was talking about, where just kind of always on the clock. Every time I seem to look up, it's back on the clock. So absolutely loving it. Some drafts taking a little bit longer than I'd like, but still the thrill of being on the clock. Gotta love it. Gotta enjoy it. And there's many more yet to still proceed with this one. So having a blast and all that good stuff. Any kind of news notes we want to hit up here?
I think for a lot of teams, a lot of players doing dynasty rookie drafts, I think the news of JJ McCarthy, having to get knee surgery, he's going to miss a significant amount of time. I think it's a torn patella, if I'm not mistaken. He's going to miss a significant amount of time. We saw Hollywood Brown suffer a pretty serious injury with his, I think it was like his chest bone for lack of a better term.
Where your sternum and your clavicle meet.
Right. Okay. So yeah. So thank you. But that's a very serious injury, and he had to go to the hospital. We'll see how long that takes him out for. I think there were a lot of people that were hoping that him on the Chiefs was going to be him and Mahomes would be a nice little match there.
I can tell you from experience that is not a fun injury.
And I think the will he or won't he with CeeDee Lamb is still very intriguing. We're getting to a point now where people are having to make decisions, right? And people are in drafts where CeeDee Lamb, if CeeDee Lamb is playing for the Dallas Cowboys, is likely, right, a top 5 wide receiver in the league. He has given us no reason to believe otherwise. So if you are going to pass on a top 5 wide receiver, how do you square that up, right? How do you square up passing on a CeeDee Lamb if you're drafting before he signs? Yeah, that's a very intriguing and maybe frustrating spot for a lot of people to be in. Have you guys come across that situation where?
Same thing going on with Jamar Chase right now too, right? These hold-ins and these guys that are in the middle of these contract things and everything else, right? Like it's one of those that if you're drafting this early, you're going to have to just kind of pick your poison ultimately, right? Like that's where it's going to come down to. Do you take a guy that is already, locked and loaded and ready to go? There's still preseason games. There's still camp. There's still, practice, all of this stuff going on in which, we've seen that where guys get hurt. That's why, one of our tidbits is draft as late as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like the league of record, the home league, that one typically always drafts the weekend right before the season actually kicks off, right? After all the games are done, there's not any preseason action going there. Camps are kind of wrapped up. You've already seen roster cut downs and all of that happen so that you've got the most information there. So if you're drafting this early though, you're ultimately just going to have to make that choice, right? Because you're right, Alex, CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase, both of those guys are considered top 5 at the position as far as draft picks go. And you're going to have to just kind of pick your poison. Do you take one of those guys? But even if you're going to pass, you can still probably, fall back to guys like Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Like there's a lot of other kind of options in there that if you got a pivot there, you can be really happy with as well. So
I got nothing. I'm drafting him. I got nothing. Like I moved him down one spot. I'm taking Tyreek Hill as my top receiver off the board, and then I'm going CeeDee Lamb. Like, I have zero confidence in this Dallas Cowboys running game. The Cowboys know that CeeDee Lamb has them kind of stuck here, so I don't worry about that getting done. I trust that he is going to, come into camp in shape and ready to go. And once he's on the field, I thoroughly expect him to lead the league in targets this season. And with targets come opportunities for receptions, yardages, touchdowns. Like I'm not freaking out about this. So I moved him down one spot from wide receiver 1 to wide receiver 2. That's it.
Fair enough. Any other kind of news notes we want to hit up?
No, let's get into some strategies. I think I'm good.
Sure.
All right. Let's go ahead and rock and roll through that. So some of the, folks out there watching, you'll see these constant things out there where folks are promoting one type of draft strategy or over another, or constantly kind of talking about those things. In fact, you may have heard us reference some of these things in the past as well, and talk about that. So some of the kind of more popular ones out there would be things like late QB, hero RB, hero wide receiver, RB heavy, wide receiver heavy, early tight end, late tight end, QB early. Like there's all sorts of these kind of different catchy little phrases that people will use to try and talk about a strategy there. We're going to kind of go through and touch on and hit on some of these things here kind of real quick and just kind touch on some of these things on how they might kind of look, work, those types of things there. But who wants to start us off here with the draft strategy?
So I'll just start right at the top, right? Late QB. So the idea behind late QB is you're loading your roster up with as much skill position talent as humanly possible. And then you're grabbing a quarterback later in the draft. Now, when we say later in the draft, what does that mean? Typically, that means round 10 or later. So, quarterbacks that can be had in that range. At times, Jared Goff will fall that far, as crazy as that is. Geno Smith, Baker Mayfield, obviously, Will Levis, Aaron Rodgers has been going that late. Matt Stafford has been going that late. So a lot of name power still. You do not have the rushing upside. Will Levis is probably the exception of a quarterback that you can get that late, but I'm not trusting him as a QB1. Like, he's a nice second quarterback to pivot to and see if he pops. But in single quarterback strategy, you're sacrificing the running on most of these QBs late. But what you get is you should see some consistency, and you get that veteran presence where they shouldn't just have that complete bomb game, right? Aaron Rodgers is probably not the quarterback he was 3 years ago when he won his last MVP. However, Aaron Rodgers does not turn the ball over. So if you are in a league that heavily penalizes interceptions and you want to stack up on skill position players and you're looking at a quarterback late, is Aaron Rodgers. Terry, you're not wrong. So Terry popped up there, the perfect late round quarterback is Cousins. Cousins borderline what I would consider late, because a lot of times you see him clip off, late 8th to the middle of the 9th round. So if we're talking round 10 and later, it becomes gray area. Now, there's nothing wrong with Cousins, right? There's a lot of hype around this Atlanta offense. There's nothing wrong with that pick whatsoever. I'm just specifically talking about quarterbacks 10 and later, and depending on how you're feeling about yourself. I've seen guys run it out and they don't take their first quarterback till round 12 in a 14 round draft. And that's super late. Like, you got to have some cojones and some fortitude to be able to not buy into a run when people are taking second quarterbacks or something like that. And you got to kind of hold your ground and understand where the strength of your team is. It's in the skill position. And then you're grabbing 2 quarterbacks, in the last 3 rounds or something like that to be able to kind of finish it off.
Right. I don't mind pulling the trigger on a 12th or even 13th round QB, this year, as far as how some of those things are going. But you're right, Kevin. There's a lot of those times you're going, oh my, I hope that somebody that I want to take is there, right? Like, there's some of that you got to hope a lot. So.
The good news is we've seen quarterbacks the last couple of years pop off the waiver wire and be big time darlings. Jordan Love, Brock Purdy were the 2 last year, right? Just, right off the top. You were able to grab those guys off the waiver wire if you had a quarterback situation, right? If you fell in love with Anthony Richardson, nothing wrong with that. All the promise in the world. But if you grabbed Richardson last year and then he went down and you were scrambling, there is a good chance that you were pivoting to a Baker Mayfield, a Jordan Love, or a Brock Purdy. Well, guess what? All those guys finished in the top 12. Like, what better scenario to kind of say, oh, I can wait on quarterback, and after 2 weeks, if I don't like it, I can see what's out there and kind of pivot, right? We kind of have an idea. So if you're not, my personal opinion, if you're not going after what I would consider the top 5 quarterbacks, okay? And when I say top 5, I here's what I mean. I'm talking about Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and Dak Prescott. Ooh, I just said it, right? It's not CJ Stroud. It's Dak Prescott. There's no run game in Dallas, guys. We got to remember that. And if we talked about this a month ago, Dak Prescott's numbers are identical to Patrick Mahomes. So if you're willing to draft Patrick Mahomes in the 3rd or 4th round, why not wait another 3 rounds and then draft Dak Prescott? You're getting the exact same statistical output over the last, what was it, Derek? 60 games, basically?
About 5 years, yeah.
So exact same statistical output. So those are my top, in not necessarily in that order, but yes, Dak over CJ. I love CJ Stroud, but get out of here. Yes, Dak over CJ Stroud.
He has to talk that mess because he doesn't have CJ Stroud in the home league, so he's gotta put that boy down.
Hold on.
Question here.
Hold on. That sets it up perfect right there. It sounds like we've got two very opposing viewpoints here. Dak versus CJ. Is there a gentleman's agreement to be made here?
No, because I think that Dak does have a better year. I'm married to CJ, so I need to gas him up. As much as Kevin needs to put him down, I got to gas him up. All right.
He's not putting him down. It just is what it is. I like CJ Stroud. We pounded the table for this kid last year, saying he was the best rookie quarterback coming out. It was not Bryce Young. This is not throwing shade at CJ Stroud. This is simply how I have it set up and how I am ranking my quarterbacks. CJ Stroud is not in my top 5.
Pardon me. I will say, and this is a question for you guys as well, but I think I know the answer. To do a late quarterback, it only works in certain leagues, right? If you're in a super flex, going late quarterback, like that's harder to do, right?
Well,
move it up 3 rounds.
Yes.
You can go super flex and do it in the 7th and 8th, and then you just kind of have to go back to back on it. But you can do that, and you still get that same general caliber quarterback, unless you have outrageous scoring. But ideally, if it's a 4 touchdown, if it's 4 points per passing touchdown in a super flex, same general rules apply. If I'm not on the top half of the draft where I can grab the guys, one of those 5 guys, then I'll hammer skill positions. I might, try and grab a Dak maybe in the 2nd or 3rd, how that turnaround kind of works, if it falls to me that way. And if not, I'm not going to freak out about it. I'll kind of see where it goes, and then I'll go through and hit, hammer it the 7th, 8th, and then again in like the 15th or 16th, because typically there's 16 rounds in a super flex draft.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite things to do in that scenario, Alex, isn't necessarily to go late, but you wait for those first couple of runs, because you can still, a lot of times in the 3rd, 4th, and that kind of deal, pick up and get a pairing of Jordan Love and Dak in those 2 in the super flex. Like, that's, you kind of let the runs go and you target those guys. And that's kind of the secret I've found, is that in a lot of super flex, targeting that 8th, 9th, 10th quarterback off the board, you're typically set up pretty well. Like last year, that was Tua and Dak in a lot of those cases, right? So you can certainly make some hay there.
I know that we talk about, we've done these player profiles and we've talked about these guys. And if you haven't seen them, Derek does a nice job putting those up on the YouTube page. Like and subscribe. But where we're looking at ADP right now, names that you guys have thrown out there in terms of quarterbacks that you can wait on and maybe take later, right? You mentioned Baker, you mentioned Aaron Rodgers, Kirk Cousins, obviously, I think is the late draft darling. But there's another name out there that I think, I don't know what you guys are, if you're comfortable waiting on, but that's Deshaun Watson in Cleveland. You mentioned Geno Smith.
Here's another scary one for you, Daniel Jones.
Daniel Jones is way down there, and he does have rushing upside, especially with Saquon gone now. Like that's a one that, like, yes, some things are gonna have to go right for you if you draft Daniel Jones, but if you wait to draft Daniel Jones, you should have dominated in the previous rounds, that you have gained an advantage that a Daniel Jones shouldn't really hurt. Like, it shouldn't hurt to have a Daniel Jones on your roster. He's way down there on ADP.
So, yeah, that's another guy that I don't mind kind of taking the flyer on in a late QB type of strategy.
And his rushing upside, man. That is something that you can't ignore.
Correct. Yep. I keep seeing Will Levis kind of pop up here as well. Will Levis does provide a couple of wheels up type of options there as well.
Yeah, Kevin had
and
mentioned him earlier as a
I
good.
think he's Daniel Jones with options at wide receiver.
Yeah, that's about accurate.
Yeah.
Like, in all seriousness, like I think he's very comparable to Daniel Jones, in my opinion, with weapons at wide receiver.
Yeah, with dudes that can catch. I mean, yeah, Terry, it's a scary thought, but the comment there is the thought of drafting Daniel Jones gives me gas from Terry, but it's a scary thought. But man, like with where he is going, that's not bad. You can gain such an advantage in other positions in other rounds.
Right.
Again, I think a lot of things are going to have to go right for you if you take a Daniel Jones and that's your ticket to the promised land. Don't hang your hat on a Daniel Jones. You hang your hat on how good you were rounds, 1 through 15 to then just score a Jones there at the end.
Right. I mean, it's one of those that if you're going late round QB, you almost go quarterback by committee type of thing when that's all said and done there too, right? Like that's another type of strategy that can come up there.
This is an interesting
typically
comment.
It means you don't have to carry 2 tight end spots. Right.
Yeah.
If you're going late QB, that means in most cases you have a pretty top end tight end, right? Anything from Dalton Kincaid, Kyle Pitts, Evan Ingram, is even higher. Andrews, those. So you don't need a second tight end on your roster in a redraft league. Those second guys are a dime a dozen anyway. So that's where that roster spot comes from, right? Where you can clearly carry 2, and it's not troubling to your bench makeup.
Right.
I'd like to address this comment from Lonely B here, and I'm assuming he said it's me, Sam Darnold. But Sam Darnold, it's going to be interesting now. We talked about J.J. McCarthy's knee injury. He still has Justin Jefferson to throw to, right? Now Sam Darnold's going to be the guy, right? He is presumed to be the guy there in Minnesota, whereas there were some question marks while J.J. McCarthy was still around. Does that change how you guys view a Sam Darnold at all?
I think it puts him in that territory of Will Levis. It just matters of what you're wanting, right? Like, I would rather have Geno over both of them. I don't know about Deshaun Watson. Like, I wanted Deshaun Watson. Like, personal antics aside, right? Everybody has an opinion. I don't care about the personal thing for this exercise. I think we were all expecting him to be closer to his sophomore and junior season than what he's been. Like, he is. I'm not going to say he's damaged goods, but he's not as good as he once was. And he's only about 60% of what he once was in most cases. Like, his processing speed looks super slow. He doesn't look as mobile as what he was before. His arm looks like it lost a little bit. Like, he just doesn't have, because Watson had a freaking cannon, right? Just lofting 50, 60-yard bombs while Nuke and Fuller were just kind of running underneath him off of a scramble. And he just doesn't quite have that anymore. And Cleveland's not set up that way. Right. Stefanski wants to run the rock, and not that he doesn't want Nick Chubb back, because I will never say that Kevin Stefanski does not want Nick Chubb, but he's going to run the ball regardless of whether it's Devonta Foreman, whether it's Jerome Ford, whether it's Nick Chubb, or whether it's Alex, playing running back for him. He's going to send you between the tackles in that zone scheme.
He's got one snap, well, 2, one snap of the football, and then probably me snapping in half.
That would be 2 snaps.
But yes, so Sam Darnold,
you'd be halfway to Aaron Rodgers.
Has some appeal. Anything with Justin Jefferson, when you're attached to it, and the fact that it should only get better, right? Jordan Addison, we expect a suspension to be coming down, right? Whether it's 2 games or potentially 4. Jordan Addison comes back. T.J. Hawkinson's come back. This team is very nice offensively. The quarterback position is the biggest gray area, and that always leads a little bit concerned. But,
right.
Here's what it is. So, yes, all this to say, right? We've spent a ton of time on this. Sorry, guys. I knew we were trying to go through these a little faster. But all this was late quarterback strategy and reasons behind it.
Yep. So we'll kind of motor through some of these other ones quicker. And folks, if you have some questions or comments on these as we go through, make sure that you throw them out there. We'll address those. And then Terry, I do see a lot of the questions on the trade and the pickups, and we'll get to those here in a little bit here as well. So next one up on the list, Hero RB strategy. When you're looking at that, is you're taking your guy, you're taking the shot on a Hero RB strategy in round one, and then you're loading up on wide receivers, tight ends, things like that, and you're filling in with other guys that are going to be likely in that kind of RB3 area type of deal, right? So perfect guys to potentially start that off with would be Chris McCaffrey. Would be a perfect option to start that off with the Hero RB. Some other kind of popular options there would also be guys like Bijan Robinson, Breece Hall this year, and then you're filling that in with other skill positions behind that and getting that guy that's an anchor at the position and then kind of moving on from there. Anything else to add there?
No.
It's those three though. Like you Hero RB with those three. Otherwise you're reaching.
I could do it in the second round with a couple guys.
Yeah. I see the Zach Moss
as a first rounder, yes.
Zach Moss, get out of here.
I'm hoping that's the guy that you fill in for the backup behind.
Yeah.
That would be the Hero RB call of the year.
If you believe that Moss and Chase Brown aren't really going to split it, but
right.
Moss was injured, couldn't play the first week of the preseason. They've been splitting first team reps. I don't know. I don't know about the Bengals. Like I'm probably staying away from Moss and Chase Brown both. Just because I don't want the headache. Like at least with like Pittsburgh, I understand what I'm getting with Najee and Jalen Warren, right? It's very identical with Tennessee with Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears. Like you kind of understand that. Cincinnati's kind of up in the air still. Like we're not quite sure how that's broken down. History tells us they go off of a singular back because it's Joe Mixon.
Right.
But Joe Mixon's a better running back than Zach Moss. They just couldn't afford Joe Mixon, knowing that they had to pay T. Higgins on the franchise tag, Jamar Chase now sitting out, Joe Burrow's new contract, and the escalators that are coming into that. Like they just ran out of money.
Right.
So hey, I'm probably staying away from Chase and Zach Moss unless Chase falls crazy late and I just taking a shot, right? I mean, you take a guy in a dark horse, and if he pans out, great, and if not, he's waiver wire fodder.
There's a cool Hero RB situation that presents itself. If you're picking at the back end of the first round, you can pick up say how it shakes out if somebody if everything falls your direction, but you can start your draft with a Saquon and a Jonathan Taylor. Like
that would be
that's
more
very realistic,
running back heavy than a Hero RB.
It would be, which is another draft strategy that I think we're going to get to.
Perfect segue. Why don't you just hit that one up real quick?
Yeah, so running back heavy is where you are loading up on running backs your first 2-3 rounds, trying to gain the positional advantage there with running back. And I'll tell you what, it's a shame that I stepped on his toes because I think the person among us that has owned running back heavy draft strategy and was the man who brought running back heavy draft strategy to my brain is Kevin. Kevin, when I first started playing fantasy football in this league that we're in now, it used to be, and maybe this was, a lack of our fantasy football knowledge or not a lack of, but certainly not as expansive as it is now. But when I started playing in this league, you had better come right with your running back selections because Kevin was taking 4 of them before you could even get a chance to sniff them. Like that was the way that this league worked out in the first years, 15 years ago when I first joined the league, because Kevin was trying to have a monopoly on running backs in the league. And this was at a time that was 15 years ago when there was
when running backs
mattered, right? Yeah, when there was a bell cow on every team, or basically every team. But so that's a very real for this year for this purpose of a running back heavy. You could do Saquon Barkley, Jonathan Taylor at the back end of the first round, front of the second round in a snake draft. And then if you come back around, you can grab a Josh Jacobs and an Isaiah Pacheco. Like, that's very real, where that's your first 4 picks. Now, the downside of a running back heavy is you've gone 4 picks on running backs. Typically, you're going to start 2 running backs and a flex, right? So now you've got 1 extra that you're going to have to figure out what you want to do with. But that's a very realistic strategy or draft that could happen if you're picking at the 112 and then the 2-1.
Yeah.
So another one that I like in the front half of the first round is McCaffrey or Bijan. You could add Breece Hall if you have Breece Hall before, and then pair him up with Derrick Henry.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's dirty. Like,
Yes.
straight dirty, because you can get that done in the second. You come around with a Mike Evans in the third, or a DK Metcalf in the third, something like that. And you're not, yes, there's a step down from Tyreek Hill and CeeDee Lamb and Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jamar Chase, all these top end receivers, right? The Magnificent Seven, if you'll, allow me the phrase. But you can absolutely do that. You could also, if you're a Kyron fan, a lot of times Kyron will fall in the middle. So if Breece goes later, because typically that's the one who will slip. It's not Bijan, it's Breece. If one of those top 3 running backs is going to fall to the middle, you could go Breece and then turn around and get a Kyron. You could also do something similar with like Travis Etienne.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a couple spots within the first 2 rounds how these backs are falling that if you want to go RB heavy and then blanket receiver for the next however many rounds, or tight end, there's absolutely clear paths to get those combinations.
Yeah, absolutely. Other draft strategy out there. Do we want to hit up hero wide receiver? Where do we want to go?
Sure. Derek, show me how you would do a hero wide receiver.
Okay, well, hero wide receiver would be, you're kind of the inverse of the hero RB, right? Like, you're taking your shot on your guy there at the wide receiver position, right? And that's typically going to be one of the heavy hitters right off the bat, right? The CeeDee Lambs, the Tyreek Hills, Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown, kind of one of those guys in there. And then, where that's gonna lead to is that you can follow that up with other, skill positions down the road, right? Like, you could, Kevin mentioned it earlier, you could then hit up a Derrick Henry in the second round. You could hit up a potential Josh Jacobs in there, Isaiah Pacheco, something like that. Something that could be very interesting there as well. If you're going hero wide receiver, is go, do like a Tyreek Hill, follow it up with a Derrick Henry and a Jalen Hurts, and kind of rounds 1, 2, 3, and that could make for a very interesting pairing there when you're kind of rocking and rolling that, and where you're looking for that wide receiver to anchor it. You'll fill that in with some other guys down the road, and you're really looking for those guys to pop. The breakout type of seasons, the Nico Collins that you can get late in drafts, those types of individuals there. But you're just looking to load up at other positions and not necessarily follow suit with wide receiver heavy coming off the board there. Any other thoughts there?
Yeah, it's not. This strategy isn't quite as popular, especially in today's
correct
NFL. With as frantic as some leagues are just hammering wide receiver, like, it's impossible to do an underdog.
Mm-hmm.
Because receivers are so pushed up the board that, you can get that first one and you can double tap running back after that. But by the time you get to the fourth, you feel like you are just swimming in a cesspool, and you're not. Like, there's still talent there, but you did kind of miss the boat. It's much harder to do in like an underdog setting. Home leagues are always a unicorn. Each one's a little different, So home leagues, you kind of have some opportunity to still do that thing. Even random single quarterback leagues, I think you still have some, but best ball leagues, particularly on underdog, it is a really tall task.
Fair enough.
Let's talk wide receiver heavy. And let's talk about where in your draft you can maximize that. And I think wide receiver heavy this year, if you're trying to do wide receiver heavy, I think you're in the middle to late picks there. I think that is where you can really, really maximize it. And chime in here if you feel differently, fellas. But I think if you're, let's just say in the 8 spot, you can take an Amon-Ra St. Brown. You can come back around and get a Devontae Adams in the 2nd. And then picking somewhere in the 30s, you can get a Michael Pittman, a Brandon Ayuk, or a Mike Evans. And while I think you've created a pretty generous positional advantage there at wide receiver, you are going to have to try and sneak around a few other spots to try and get some points back at running back or tight end. But I think that's a very, like, if you're picking in that 7, 8, 9 spot, going wide receiver heavy is not a bad strategy to employ this year.
Actually,
go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, at this point, like I really have a hard time finding a spot on the board that I don't like going RB heavy, right? Like, or I guess wide receiver heavy, right?
Wide receiver.
The only spots that I'm maybe not as big a fan of that is when you kind of start getting into that 6, 7, 8 type of spot, and that's just kind of where those first kind of those top heavy 5 wide receivers come off the board. You got kind of the 2 running backs there, Breece Hall and Bijan typically kind of go in that range, and then you've got kind of the next tier of wide receivers there, and that's where you can you're looking more at pairing those 2 up than more so being able to have the elite tier and then kind of follow it up with the next set of guys there when it comes to wide receiver.
So here's one I did in a in a underdog best ball league. Tyreek in the 1st, Mike Evans in the 2nd, and DK in the 3rd.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
And that might be, at least as far as that strategy of going super wide receiver heavy right off the bat, that might be my favorite overall combination. Obviously, you could alternate Tyreek and CeeDee Lamb depending on where your flavor is. You could alternate Mike Evans with Brandon Ayuk or Deebo Samuel. Again, if you
I've seen
would rather have one of those. And then with DK, a lot of times you could go DJ Moore. You could go Jalen Waddle also, right? Like if you went CeeDee Lamb and then Mike Evans, you could then go Jalen Waddle to still get the Dolphins and the Cowboys kind of put together that way. So there's tons of combinations there at the top of the draft that I really like for wide receiver heavy.
Right. Yeah, I would agree. That leaves us with kind of early tight end, late tight end. Let's just kind of cover these 2 together since they're kind of the inverse of each other. Early tight end, it kind of signifies in the name there you're taking a tight end early, right? You're trying to get the positional advantage there, right? The Sam Laportas, the Travis Kelce's, Trey McBride type of guys there. Late tight ends are the guys that you basically punt the position and you're just playing the streaming tight end all season long, right? Like guys like Tyler Conklin come into that type of deal there. You can even get like a Dalton Schultz late in there as well. Kind of thoughts around this one?
Yeah, I don't mind doing either one this year. I like Trey McBride. I like Mark Andrews. Like I think Laporta and Kelsey for me are probably a little rich, but then McBride, Andrews, I really like. And then Evan Ingram is a guy that I really like this year. And then we skip down a few more, and then Jake Ferguson from the Cowboys. He was second in the team in targets. So, tons of opportunity there for Ferguson. TJ Hawkinson's still down there. So I don't mind having Hawkinson be my first tight end, if you will, just knowing that I'm going to have to turn around and pair it up, with a K. Dotton, Luke Musgrave, something of that nature. Or if you grab, here's a little trick. If you are going after Mark Andrews, if you're going after Mark Andrews, he is the one true tight end to handcuff, and that is Isaiah Likely. And there's opportunity there for likely to have some standalone value this year. So you might even get some extra bang for your buck on that one. So just be mindful. Like if I'm grabbing Mark Andrews, I am absolutely going to make sure that I go for Isaiah Likely, even if I have to reach it by a round or so, just to make sure that I have those two paired up, and then I have the tight end for Baltimore covered because it's such an integral part of that offense.
Right. Awesome. Leaves us with QB early. Any thoughts around QB early as a strategy? I feel like we kind of hit this one up already earlier, but let's go ahead and
right. It's much like the other early rounds. It is to try and get the positional advantage. You're setting yourself apart. So Allen, Hurts, Mahomes, Jackson, then take your pick at 5, right? Like I've seen Kyler Murray's name thrown in at 5. I've seen Joe Burrow's name at 5, CJ Stroud, Richardson. Obviously, I threw out Dak. Like there's a bunch of guys in that 5 through 9 window who all have the potential of ending up at 5 or 4 or 3. Potentially 1, right? Anything's possible. We haven't played a snap yet, so potentially
Stranger
1.
things, yeah.
But so it is kind of setting that thing up. This is probably the strategy I actually go into a draft thinking that this is what I want to do, the least in a single quarterback league. Like I just don't have interest in it. I feel like I can find and get just as much value on a week in, week out basis, even if I'm having to shuffle between two guys, waiting on QB as opposed to doing the set it and forget it. Like I am already going to be hitting the waiver wire and watching it like a hawk regardless. So now I'm doing it with quarterback instead of, a flex or, a tight end position. So typically it's really hard. Just again, little trick of the trade. It's really difficult to go early tight end and early quarterback.
Right.
Like normally you are sacrificing one for the other. You can go later on both because the draft spreads out and some values happen. But when everyone's so affixed to ADP and going and getting their guy early in a draft, it is really hard to go early tight end and early quarterback. I particularly don't care for it very much. I feel like it makes my running back and wide receiver positions look very shallow, and I get nervous when they're like that.
Yep.
I think that's the thing is that you have to watch all of those running backs and wide receivers names come off the board as you're sitting there with a quarterback and a tight end. And you're like, oh, no, there's only one of those typically, right? In a single QB league, you've got one quarterback spot and typically only one tight end spot. But you're watching, running back after running back and wide receiver after wide receiver, and there's multiples of those. So you need to have a bigger pool to draw from for those positions. So I have fallen victim, and we did it in this last mock that we did. Was that last week? Where I fell victim to seeing a quarterback there. Patrick Mahomes is there, and what were we in the 3rd or the 4th round? And I was like, and that's hard to pass up on. And I did it, and then I just felt like I was trying to recover from that pick for the rest of the draft. And so, like, I think, yes, there are times, and certainly in the home league where quarterbacks are so valuable with the crazy scoring that we have. So depending on your league, there is a time and place for taking quarterback with your first overall pick, especially our home league is a super flex, and quarterbacks are crazy valuable in that league. So you're going to take a quarterback early because you need those points. You need every bit of points that you can get. And so like that league, it makes sense to take it early. Single QB league standard scoring, you shouldn't even think about a quarterback until you're at least 7 or 8 rounds in, because there is positional value that you can gain at running back, wide receiver, that is very different from quarterback, say 8 through 12, right? And only 12 quarterbacks are going to start each week in a single QB standard scoring league. QB 8 through QB 20, I mean, that's a crapshoot, right? Like, we know the top 7, if you will. Kevin's top 5 includes Dak, but that's a crapshoot between QB 8 and QB 20 at any given week. So if that's going to be a crapshoot, why not just wait on it and get your positions that you can set and forget week in and week out at running back and wide receiver.
Absolutely. Very cool. Any other thoughts here on any of the strategies we've hit up? All right. We did have quite a few questions come in here. Let's go ahead and hit these up here real quick, and then we're going to get into some mocking.
We did. Great chat this week.
I liked it. Love the questions coming in. Terry asked the question, full PPR, Olave or Debo. Personally, I'd take Olave there.
Oh, see, I think if Ayuk gets out of town, I'm on the Debo train.
I would agree with that. If there's a guarantee, right? If you're drafting right now, I'm probably going Olave just because of overall target share. If you're not drafting for another week or two and Ayuk is either re-signed or traded, if he's traded, it's Debo. Right. Like, Debo absolutely starts to look like he's inside the top 10 in wide receiver. So a lot of that's dependent on Ayuk. As it sits today, Ayuk is on the roster, so I'm going to take Olave over Debo, but only by a smidge.
I like it. Trade question. Would you trade away DK for DJ Moore? Not this year. I wouldn't.
No, okay. I DK is one of my guys this year. I really like me some DK this year. It's not Gino, maybe. It's the new offensive philosophy coming in.
Yeah. No, I get that. I get
away from the ground and pound and everything else. We are going to see this team air it out a little bit more. And I'm not saying they're going to be, the greatest show on turf 2.0. I'm simply saying they are going to air it out a little bit more. It's not just going to be pounding the ball all game long and leaning on the defense. The Seahawks are coming to put up some points.
I see that. I like it.
All righty. Terry was asking, CD's holdout doesn't concern you at all health wise. Maybe a touch, but not enough that it's going to drop him super late at this point.
He's a vet. He knows how to take care of himself. Yeah. I mean, hammies can happen to anybody.
Yeah.
Right.
Hammies can happen to anybody, right? Any soft tissue injury worries me. At the moment, he doesn't have one. So you just got to hope that, like what Alex was saying, he's a pro. He knows how to take care of his body. He's going to do the right thing. So that way, once he gets his contract, he is going to be in uniform and ready to go. And if he does, like I said, he could easily lead the league in targets this year. So I absolutely want a piece of that if I can get it.
Because it's not just this contract, right? It's the next contract, whether it comes from Dallas, whether it comes from somebody else. He's going to have to prove that he is worth the money that team is that he feels that he's worth. So, I mean, he's going to stay in tip-top shape no matter what, because this next contract is life-changing money for him and his family.
The Cowboys and Bengals are just staring each other down right now.
Yeah, they're really well, and that's what happened with
the closest, or who is going to try and top.
That's what happened
Justin
with
Jefferson's contract.
Yeah, with Miami and oh shoot, who are the quarterbacks that signed back to back? Jordan Love, right?
Love and Tua.
Yeah, and like who blinked first, right? Miami blinked first, so they got Tua for a little bit cheaper than Jordan Love. Then the Packers got Jordan Love. So, like, that's what's happening is as much as it is, and you're right, Kevin, as much as it is CD versus the Cowboys, it's the Cowboys and the Bengals and the league, right? Don't think that there aren't 30 other owners staring this one down too, to see what's going to happen, because they know that the next big thing that comes up, well, hell, that's what it's going to cost us the next time.
Well,
Right.
and the Niners better hope if the Niners are going to re-sign Ayuk, they better hope that gets done, because
Before all
Ayuk's going
this
to
mess.
think he's in this category.
Yeah.
He's not,
They're
but
gonna
Ayuk's
point
going
to
to
a
think
stat
he's
sheet
in
and
this
say,
category, and then
No,
it's
sir.
really going to cost him some money. So
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, Lonely Bee saying CD may not play if he's not signed to a deal, getting close 3 weeks after the season.
CD's going to play. He has to get the year of eligibility. CD
Yep.
Lamb will be on the field for the Dallas Cowboys at some point this year. He is not going to sit the year out and lose his year of eligibility.
Yep.
And if you got to play some games, you might as well play them all.
Exactly. Brian asking, who do you guys have winning each conference? We'll get into that whole show typically right before the season starts. So make sure you turn in here in about 3 weeks.
Please don't
Chiefs and
keep us-
Niners.
Oh,
Repeat.
yeah. I mean, yeah.
Lonely Bee saying that it's shocking how little difference there is between QB 10 and QB 20. That's part of the thing that leads into that whole late QB strategy in there as well. Lonely Bee also saying that since he has a good offense, whoever the RB is will put up RB2 numbers. Maybe.
If they're running a single back, if they're
Correct.
splitting it, again, this offense is built around Joe Burrow's right arm. So if he's healthy and they're splitting those carries,
Collectively, RB2, but
yeah, collectively RB2 with RB1 upside.
yeah,
Right.
Absolutely.
but that's not how we get to play the fantasy
Individually,
football.
I don't know.
Right.
Like I said, I'm just worried about that one.
Wouldn't that be great if you could take just the team's running backs? You're like, all right, from my running back slot, I've taken the Denver Broncos running backs. That's who I get to play. I get all their points that week.
Right.
Right.
So Terry saying the full PPR number 2 pick out of 10. Which combo do you prefer for your first 3 draft picks? Option 1, Tyreek Hill, Drake London, Chris Olave. Option 2, Tyreek Hill, Travis Etienne, Chris Olave. Number 3, Tyreek Hill, Etienne, Pacheco. 4, Hill, London, Debo. I like these options. I do find it very interesting that you've narrowed it down into Tyreek Hill or Buck.
Well, I think he's already picked Tyreek Hill, or he's just decided that he does not want to deal with the CD drama, and that's okay too. Like
and
that's
CMC
the beauty of picking it too.
Yeah.
As long as the guy at number 1 doesn't pick Tyreek Hill, like then you got a decision to make, right? Like, do I switch all this to CD Lamb, or do I just take McCaffrey?
Right.
I think
so. Here's what my thought is with it being a 10-team league, running backs will be a little depressed. And so if you can differentiate yourself at receiver and your flex position, you're essentially going to get 2 birds with 1 stone and still be able to get some solid running backs later on. So I'm liking Hill, London.
Option 1's my favorite.
I think having Tyreek Hill makes me like Debo a little more, because now I have a gap if Debo doesn't quite get there. But if Debo hits, I think you're there, because I do not believe Olave has a true opportunity to finish inside the top 7 or 8. I just do not see Chris Olave doing that. I see there's a path for Debo to finish inside the top 8 wide receivers. So having Tyreek Hill as that buffer makes me like Debo more. So I would lean option 4.
Okay. Alex, any differing thoughts?
No, I think of the choices presented, I think I lean 4 as well. I was just trying to look and see like why he's married to ETN when he could potentially have like a.
I can understand.
If he could go Hill, ETN, and Derrick Henry, that would be my one pivot.
Yeah.
If you could go Tyreek Hill, Travis Etienne, and Derrick Henry as your 1, 2, 3, I would start that way. Again, I think Derrick Henry is going to lead the league in touchdowns. So I've said that a couple times on our show now. So I do have a fanboy, love affair with Derrick Henry this year. And then in the fourth, see what receivers come back. But I think you could still get really good options in the fourth round for receiver if you were to do that. But I don't like Pacheco enough to draft him in the third.
I mean, in the fourth, you may see DK slip there. He's kind of going in the 40s right now. Cooper Kupp. Yep.
Yeah, Cooper Kupp. I'm not afraid of Cooper Kupp in the fourth.
Nope.
Not this year.
I didn't love
sir.
Cooper Kupp in the first, but I'm not afraid of Cooper Kupp in the fourth.
Yeah.
Right. That's a scary combination if you could start that off with like Hill, Etienne, Henry, and Kupp. Like just
yeah. Good night, Irene.
Oh man.
All right. Lonely Bee.
Be still my beating heart.
No, I don't like Jacobs.
Not a fan.
Like,
not a fan up in Green Bay this year.
That's the Green Bay offense I want. I want Jordan Love. I want Christian Watson. Like, those are the pieces I want of Green Bay. I don't want Josh Jacobs. I just don't. Like, I don't see them cutting A.J. Dillon. They drafted Marshawn Lloyd. Yes, Lloyd's a little dinged up right now, but I'm not convinced that Jacobs is the answer. His statistically, he was not good last year in Las Vegas. Like he just was not. His yards per carry weren't good. His explosion rate wasn't good. His game film backs that up. Like he did not look like he stood out on the game film. And if you just blindly took the numbers off the jerseys and watch players run, I would be willing to bet that most people would flip Josh Jacobs and Zamir White and what they did.
Probably.
Give me their highlight tapes, strip them of their jersey numbers, and you just see guys in Las Vegas gear running. I bet most people would confuse Jacobs for Zamir White.
Yeah, very well could. I don't mind Josh Jacobs when he was still going in like the fifth round where his ADP is creeped up to in the last few weeks. Not a fan of having to take him in the third, right? When I could get him closer to RB20 off the board, that was the place to take him. But now where you're having to, you're really where that ADP is certainly creeped up there. No, thank you. Alrighty. Lonely Bee saying, I feel like it's different.
White. That's what I'd rather have. I'd rather have Rashad White than Josh
Absolutely.
Jacobs.
Yes. Sign me up for that. Lonely Bee saying, Phil, it's different this year because there are 6 or 7 tight ends that could be tight end 1. Saying Laporta, Kelsey, McBride, Andrews, Kincaid, and Kittle if Ayuk gets traded as those tight ends. That could be, and I can certainly kind of see where you're going with that. However, right, like as much as everybody wants to put the ascension on the season Sam Laporta had, which was a very, very good season, that would have put him at wide receiver 15 last season with where he finished from a statistical output and for fantasy points and everything else. Whereas in years past, tight end 1 was wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 overall. And there was a significant positional advantage at that point. Whereas now you've got kind of all these guys muddled kind of right around 200 points, and 200 points for half point PPR scoring just isn't going to get the job done to the point where when you're taking these guys with second, third round picks, because guys that would score around 200 points last year, Michael Pittman, DK Metcalf, Calvin Ridley, those guys aren't going in second, maybe, third round type of picks. Those guys are 4th, 5th, 6th round picks in a lot of cases. Any other thoughts on the tight end there?
It's draft.
Tight end's wicked this year. That's very weird.
Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and rock and roll here. We've got our fancy dancy little wheel. And this one here is going for where we're drafting. Who is first up on the list? Who's going first?
Alphabetical. That's
all right. Alex, your draft position will be.
Do it. Oh, you son of a gun. All right.
You are DOS 101. All right, that would put me next up here. At the 102. All right,
12.
Kevin.
That was 12. That wasn't 2.
I'm sorry, the 112.
Yeah, 112 at the 112.
Smack
Kevin gets
dab
the
in the
pick
middle.
at the
There we
108.
go.
Nice. All right. Look at this wheel doing us some favor.
All right. I like this. Okay.
All right. So the draft is a single QB with a flex, a kicker, a defense, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, 1 tight end, 5 bench spots, 12 teams in the league. Everybody on board with that?
Yep.
All right. I'm drafting first. It is a no-brainer, Christian McCaffrey.
All right. McCaffrey, Lamb, ooh, up at 3. Brown, AJ Brown.
Oh, we got to decide, I guess, our draft strategies that we're doing. If we were going to employ a draft strategy in this.
I think we'll see how they develop.
All righty. So Kevin taking Bijan there. Then Brees Hall comes off the board. Puka Nacua, Jahmyr Gibbs. That puts me on the clock here. And there are lots of really kind of fun possibilities here. But really loving these options right here. Going to take Garrett Wilson and Saquon Barkley.
All right. So 11 goes with Taylor. So you see some RB heavy strategies right here, right? Gibbs and Taylor. You got Puka and Marvin Harrison. That's been a pretty popular strategy right around the back end of that turn. And then Brees Hall and Kyron Williams. I believe that's kind of one we talked about here earlier when we were going RB heavy here. So have some options here in front of me. Drake London, they're saying, is kind of that top receiver on the board. I do not want to pair up London and Bijan. If it was best ball, I'd jump all over it. But here for this purpose, I am going to pivot away. So let's see here. I like my chances here. So go to the old faithful here. Travis Etienne.
All right, after Etienne, it's Devon Achane. Drake London goes. Team 6 has done an Amon-Ra St. Brown, Drake London first 2 picks. That's not bad. Then Derrick Henry, which kind of throws a wrench in my plans. Josh Allen, first quarterback, goes off the board at the 209. Brandon Ayuk, Chris Olave. And so I'm back on the clock here with the turnaround. Devontae Adams is best available. And while I think that Devontae Adams is good, I don't know what they're doing at quarterback. It's a tough spot here because your best running back available is still Josh Jacobs. I could go tight end to try and gain a positional advantage there, but I think that I'm going to wait on tight end. So all right. I'll take a Devontae Adams. And then on the turn, I'm going to go Nico Collins.
How close were you to a tilt there, Alex? It seemed like that might have been
pretty close.
Okay.
That very close.
Very close.
Very close.
All right. After Nico, we got Sam Laporta, Travis Kelce, Mike Evans, Stephon Diggs, Josh Jacobs, Lamar Jackson going at the 107 here, and I am back on the board. So I could make this pretty interesting because if I were going running back here, I would go Rachaad White. Like, I would just stack this thing out. And maybe for the sake of this exercise, no, I'm not doing that. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go with my boy. I'm DK Homer this year, so I'm taking DK.
Okay. I like it. And after DK goes Jalen Waddle, DJ Moore, Debo Samuel. I like that pick, Kevin, because had DK made it past you, he certainly wasn't making it back to you. So way to go out there and get your guy on this one. So there's certainly some interesting options here, right? Like this would be one of those could potentially go with the quarterback early type of scenario. Not a fan of that myself. And typically will punt that position down the road. Jalen Hurts sitting there though, very intriguing. But this is one of those that there's a lot of different options that I really kind of like here. Kevin was talking this guy up just a moment ago, and another guy that I think is going to get all of the work in and get some pretty good options there. I'm going to go with Rachaad White here. That's going to keep me on the clock here, and I, again, could go with some running backs here. There's some pretty good kind of options there. Isaiah Pacheco still out there. Could look at wide receiver, and that's ultimately where I'm going to go is with Cooper Kupp right here as my number 2.
I like that Kupp pick right there. So right after Kupp comes off the board, Jalen Hurts, Michael Pittman, Devonta Smith. I do not like Team 9's wide receiver room. Like he has both wide receivers are the second options on those teams. Like I personally would not be doing that. All right, so got some options here. Again, could go quarterback early, could hit up tight end a little bit, could go back to the well here and see what the running back room has to offer with either a James Cook or a Joe Mixon. So I'm sailing away. Okay, so I'm gonna make some. Screw it. Why the heck not? I'm gonna double down on my running backs here. James Cook is who I took.
Okay. Well, that makes things a little bit more interesting for me. Malik Neighbors goes after that. Isaiah Pacheco. There goes Patrick Mahomes. There goes Zay Flowers. Alvin Kamara comes off the board.
I like that Kamara pick right there.
Yeah, I do too, which is kind of what I was hoping I was going to get to do. But Team 3 sniped him. CJ Stroud comes off the board. I was going to be really proud of myself because I had a nice little Kenneth Walker, Alvin Kamara turn pick that was lining itself up here, and it is not going to come to fruition. There is still Trey McBride on the board. Joe Mixon is on the board. However, I do have Nico Collins already. Do I want to do that stack? That's certainly something I have to think about. Kenneth Walker is still there for me. And I feel like the wide receiver spot, I'm not going to get anything. Tank Dell's best available. Again, I already have Nico Collins. I don't want to be fighting against myself. So the first thing I'm going to do is grab a Kenneth Walker. And then the second thing I'm going to do is grab Joe Mixon.
Fair enough. Right after Mixon, Higgins, George Pickens, Andrew McBride, Anthony Richardson, Kyle Pitts. So a little run here on tight ends in the 5th round, which is perfectly fine. It's acceptable. If you are a believer in these top 5, Dalton Kincaid would be next up. I don't want James Cook and Dalton Kincaid on the same team. No, thank you. Not going to do it. But what I am going to do is I'm going to take a wide receiver 2 here, kind of an old faithful, who I don't think is probably getting enough love or publicity from everybody here this draft season. I'm going to grab Amari Cooper to pair up with DK Metcalf.
I really like that Amari Cooper pick. I was secretly hoping that was going to make it down to me, and it did not come to fruition. That's okay though. So looking at it, there's certainly some really good options out here available, right? Like this might be one of those that could pivot, start looking at potential quarterback in here, right? Joe Burrow's on the board. You got Kyler Murray, Dak Prescott, kind of all those guys kind of right in there. Running back, some intriguing options with the James Conner out there, David Montgomery, DeAndre Swift from Andre Stevenson. Wide receivers, Keenan Allen, Christian Kirk, Terry McLaurin. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pick up my a wide receiver here, and I'm going to take the number one wide receiving option on his team here, which when you're starting to get down here in this kind of range, there's not many of those guys there. So Christian Kirk is going to come off the board right here, and that puts me back on the clock here and several different ways that I could go, but we're going to keep this as a pretty balanced type of attack here, and going to pick up a guy in a high-powered offense and a guy that will likely see the running back goal line work for Detroit, David Montgomery.
I knew you weren't going to let him pass you by.
Right. McLaurin, James Conner, Dalton Kincaid finally goes there in the 6th. So back to me. Again, back to thinking about this a little bit, right? I think what I am going to do here is I see a pretty significant tier break after this guy. I include him in the same liking as these guys who just went. We were talking about him a bit earlier. Was a target monster last year. Calvin Ridley left town in Jacksonville, and so I think that is just going to continue this year, regardless of them bringing in Brian Thomas and Gabe Davis. So I am going to grab Evan Ingram here at 6'5".
Interesting. Okay. That is not where I thought you were going to go.
I knew that's exactly where he was going. So much so to the point I almost went the Evan Ingram route instead of Christian Kirk, but felt going more wide receiver balance there.
Okay. After Evan Ingram, Najee Harris goes, then Keenan Allen, DeAndre Swift, Ramondre Stevenson, Joe Burrow goes, Zamir White comes off the board. It is back to me. My team makeup right now, I have McCaffrey, Walker, Adams, Collins, and Mixon. So I've got my starters pretty well filled out. We're just looking at depth right now. Top wide receiver that's available is Romeo Dunze. Jaden Reed is also there. There's a couple quarterbacks. But I think we'll wait the round. We'll take the flyer here because we are doing okay at receiver with Adams and Collins. I think we take the flyer here with Romeo Dunze there in Chicago. Maybe he and Caleb Williams can figure out some sort of chemistry that will help them out. And then I've been convinced by a certain podcast host that I happen to take his word very seriously. And I'm gonna pull the trigger here on my quarterback and take Dak Prescott.
All right. Tony Pollard, Raheem Mostert, Jonathan Brooks, Xavier Worthy, Jake Ferguson, Calvin Ridley coming back to me here. So couple different options here. But I think I like this one a lot. I like the idea of Chris Godwin playing in the slot a lot this year in Tampa Bay, and that is what they keep telling us is going to happen. So I am going to add some wide receiver depth with Chris Godwin in the 7th.
Very nice pick there. That was the one that I had queued up top of the queue there, ready to go. So really like that Chris Godwin pick. All right, that puts me back on the clock. After Chris Godwin, Kyler Murray, Jaden Reed, Hollywood Brown. All of those guys come off the board, and that puts me out here hanging out, looking to see how I want to do this. I could go quarterbacks here, and I think kind of the last guy that I see in this tier is still there, right? With Jordan Love, could be looking at running backs here. that might be one that's worth punting down the road just a little bit more. With already 3 there. Wide receivers, kind of ho-hum in this range. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually take the Jordan Love pick to rock and roll the quarterback room here. And then you're kind of looking at it as well. Could go wide receiver, could go running back, but you know what? I'm going to go ahead and take a flyer on tight end and just kind of solidify that position. And we'll go ahead and take the rookie out of Vegas and kind of see how they're going to utilize him.
Right. Brock Bowers, Jordan Addison, Deontay Johnson, Rashee Rice. I really like that Rashee Rice pick right there. He was the guy who is sitting at the top of my queue. So we're going to slightly pivot here, and now I'm going to go with a Georgia boy here. Someone's got to lead the Chargers in targets, and I might as well take the best route runner on that team. I'm going to grab. Yep. I'm going to grab me some Ladd McConkey right here.
All right. After Ladd McConkey, Nick Chubb goes, Zach Moss goes, Javonte Williams, Jalen Warren, DeAndre Hopkins, Austin Eckler. Right now I'm sitting with 3 running backs, 3 wide receivers, and my quarterback. Tight end is a position of need. And right now, David Njoku is top of the heap there. And I tell you what, I was planning on waiting a little bit, but I like David Njoku right here. So I'm going to take David Njoku. Turnaround pick now. Got pretty much everything that I need in terms of my starters. So I'm looking at depth. And let's take a look real quick at top running back available is Devin Singletary there in New York. Trey Benson in Arizona, which I don't really like because James Conner is a thing. So I'm not a huge fan of what the running back options are, but I think I'm going to go for the depth piece. Oh, man. Yeah, I'm going to go Devin Singletary here.
All right, Christian Watson, Jameson Williams, Caleb Williams, Brian Thomas, Brock Purdy, Keon Coleman. All right, so we've seen a couple teams take their second quarterback already, with Caleb Williams and Brock Purdy coming off the board. I don't mind this for the Anthony Richardson owner taking Brock Purdy, right, with him not actually finishing NFL games at this point in his career. I'm okay with that pick for him. So, nevertheless, back in my court. So let's see here. Gone pretty wide receiver heavy here as of late. So let's pivot. Do I want to pivot? Yeah, they gotta. I don't know if I like that pick at all. This is unfortunate, guys. This is not really where I wanted to be, unfortunately. I don't love what I have on the board here. I don't want JSN because I have DK. I don't necessarily want to grab to
I think you're at a point here where you're going to have to reach or settle.
Well, we settled. I settled for Zeke being my 4th running back, and I think I'm okay with that.
And then after Zeke, it's Trey Benson, Gus Edwards, Jackson Smith, and Najigba come off the board. Puts me back on the clock here, and there's some options that I can certainly look at and potentially kind of rock and roll through. So when with how the board's kind of fallen and where that's kind of looking at, I'm actually going to take a guy that's going to start the season injured, but I've already got the guy that I can roll out there to start with, and I'm going to take T.J. Hawkinson here to be that difference maker down the stretch for me with this one. And then looking at this one here as well, right? Could go several different options, but I know that this guy is not going to make it back to me. And at this point, am really loving the kind of the thoughts and where you know what I'm saying all of that to then go. I'm probably going to pivot here, but no, I'm going to go it. I'm going to go ahead and go with Jacoby Myers here.
Okay. Jacoby Myers, Brian Robinson, Jaden Daniels, Tua Tagovailoa. So another interesting dual quarterback there for Team 9. Kyler Murray and Tua Tagovailoa. That's bold strategy, Cotton. Bold strategy. So here's what I'm thinking. Do I add one more really solid wide receiver piece before I start to pivot here? And so the questions that I'm going through is, do I want a Cortland Sutton alpha, right? Not what we expect to be a high-powered offense, but the number one guy nonetheless, or Romeo Doubs, who is completely getting overlooked in Green Bay for this season. So man, oh man. I am going to flip a coin here, right? They're right next to each other in ADP. I'm going to go with Sutton because he should have target share on his side, even with less volume.
All right. After Sutton, it's Dallas Goedert, Tyjae Spears, Jared Goff comes off the board. Interesting 2 QB stack for Team 5 with Patrick Mahomes, Jared Goff. Kevin's going to have to start thinking about who his signal caller is going to be. Blake Corum, Dalton Schultz, Chase Brown comes off the board. I am ecstatic that Kevin went the route that he went. Because I like Romeo Doubs as an overlooked piece on that Packers offense. So I'm going to take him here, and I don't care that it's not quite a reach as I thought it was. So I'll take Romeo Doubs, and then my next pick is going to be a little bit of a reach, but I like what he's capable of. I do think that he's going to be the guy to start at least. So if nothing else, I can get a run out of him and then flip him. But I'm going to go Chuba Hubbard because he's not getting back to me.
You're right. He wouldn't have made it back.
So that's a reach, but I had to take it.
So Charbonnet, Trevor Lawrence gets paired up with Joe Burrow for Team 3 here. Team 7 pairs up Justin Herbert with Lamar Jackson. So there's a lot of dual quarterback teams here going on. So I think as much as I would like to take Jerome Ford here, it's just this is now the gamble that I'm kind of in. Do I want to grab Jerome Ford knowing that I need to go kicker, defense? No. I'm not going to do that. All right, so I'm going to go Kirk Cousins here in the 11th.
Hey, you still ended up with Kirk Cousins. How fun.
And I still ended up with Kirk Cousins.
In the 11th, no less.
In the 11th.
All right, so after Kirk Cousins, Pat Freiermuth, Jerome Ford, Tyler Lockett to come off the board. A little disappointed about that Jerome Ford didn't make it back here, but that's okay. I thought after Kevin didn't take him, it might have slipped here, but it did not. So that's all right. We're looking at this thing, and there's still several options that we could go with, right? The team makeup, there's 4 wide receivers, 3 running backs. I've got 2 tight ends and a QB here, with several type of options. But when looking at this, we're going to go ahead and we're going to take another guy that that may very well have some potential upside, a guy that finished inside the top 10 at the position. And we're going to go ahead and take Baker right here in the 11th to kind of back up our quarterback position here, putting us back on the clock. And, really just kind of depending upon how we want to rock and roll through this one. We've still got some defense, some kickers to look at here and what that's going to look like. But, what, we'll go ahead and take a look here at our last positional pick. And with that being the case, we're going to go ahead and go with a little bit more running back depth to add a 4th one here. And we'll go ahead and pick up, the counterpart to Zeke in Dallas, and a guy that's been making a little bit of waves here in camp, but we're going to take Rico Dwaddle.
All right, Luke Musgrave, Taysom Hill. I really like that Taysom Hill pick there in the 12th. Josh Palmer, I like this one too for as late as it's going. And being able to get that veteran piece, if you will, of the Chargers. So I like that. All right, so I'm going to kick off the show here this part of it, because I know that the run is going to start. And so I might as well be the linchpin of it. I'm going to go Justin Tucker.
And then the run didn't start. What?
Just wait.
I know.
Because it's coming.
So after Justin Tucker goes Xavier Legette, Mike Williams, and Rashid Shaheed were 2 dudes that were in my queue. I thought I could get a steal out of either of those guys. Kendre Miller goes after that, then Josh Downs, then Aaron Rodgers. The queue was nice because I was going to talk about them. Mike Williams, Rashid Shaheed, gone. I have 3 picks remaining. I still need to pick a defense and a kicker. So this means that I have 1 skill position left. And I was looking, maybe I could pair up a second quarterback. There's still plenty of good quarterbacks out there. Matt Stafford, Deshaun Watson, Will Levis is still available. Geno, all of those guys are still available, starting quarterbacks. But I think the guy that I'm going to go with here is a guy that we talked about earlier in the show, having a chance to have some standalone value. And that's at the tight end position. I'm going to go Isaiah Likely. And so now I need to take a kicker or a defense. I'm going to go kicker because I feel like I can stream defenses. My biggest rule on kickers, pick the ones that play inside most of the time. So I'm going to go Brandon Aubrey from the Dallas Cowboys.
All right. Now the defensive run starts. So, Alex, we were both wrong. Defense started before the kickers. Niners, Cowboys, Jets, Chiefs, Ravens, and Steelers. Well, I'm not gonna lie. That's not necessarily how I saw some of this breaking down. But nevertheless, here, I will follow suit. Grabbing a defense here, and I'm going to go with the Cleveland Brownies.
And after the Browns, it's the Dolphins, the Eagles, and then Butker comes off the board as a kicker. And it puts me back on the clock here. As far as the defense goes, I'm going to go ahead and take a team out there that, quite frankly, I just like the way they play and want to have a piece to root for on this one. So we're going to take the Lions defense here. Puts me on the clock here with my last pick and still needing the kicker. And we're going to go ahead and take McPherson out of Cincinnati for the kicker.
Very good. And rounds out Tampa Bay, Younghoe Koo, Tyler Bass. I'm going to take Matthew Stafford to go with Kirk Cousins. Play a little musical quarterback if I need to.
That's you did not take a quarterback until the 11th round. You still ended up with two guys that I think have extremely serviceable. So that's very nice for you. After Matthew Stafford goes Jake Elliott, Jake Moody, Kylie Fairbairn, Jason Sanders, Cameron Dicker, Daniel Carlson. I need a defense. I'm just gonna throw a dart because it doesn't matter. Give me the Bills.
Fair enough. Alrighty, so that ends the draft. And real quick before we get into kind of analyzing this, a couple of questions, comments came in. Superfly over on YouTube was asking who's the most criminally underrated player of the entire draft. Thoughts on that one?
I mean,
underrated.
I think there's a couple, honestly. I mean, you could look at even T. Higgins going in the 5th. Like I know he burned some people last year, but for him going in the 5th and what that offense does is pretty bad when you have the likes of Devonta Smith and Jalen Waddle going in the 3rd and 4th respectively. I'd stack T. Higgins right up against those guys, and he's going a round and a half and a full round later respectively than those guys. So I'd tell you he's pretty criminally undervalued. I think Amari Cooper's pretty damn undervalued, being I know Judy's in town, but you know, we're here in Colorado, at least 2 of the 3 of us are. We've seen how the Jerry Judy experiment just doesn't work. And the Browns do have to throw the ball. They run to set up the pass, but when they do, you see Amari Cooper with a big time target share. So another guy in the 5th that I think has good value.
Chuba Hubbard, I think, is one too that's very undervalued at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I'll throw out a David Montgomery too. I think that he might be appropriately valued, but I think so many people are going to fall in love with Jahmyr Gibbs. And look, we already don't know if Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be healthy come week 1. David Montgomery has just been a steady force, even back when he was in Chicago. So, you know, the fact that Derek, you got him what?
In the 6th.
6th.
That's for what I presume will be a starting running back. And yeah, Jahmyr Gibbs might get his, but man.
Raheem Mostert in the 7th is another one.
Yeah, Mostert's a good one.
We value Achane in the 2nd. There is not 5 rounds of value that separate Devon Achane and Raheem Mostert. There's just not. Any way you slice it.
Yeah.
Achane had some injury history had some injury concerns last year. Raheem Mostert played all the games last year, but his career has kind of been hit or miss with some injuries. So you can't say one's, you know, an Iron Man by any stretch. They split almost identically, but it was Raheem Mostert who got first billing in Miami. So to get him in the 7th is extremely good value in my book. I was eyeing him in the 6th when I took Evan Ingram, but I didn't want to miss out on that tier break. So I made that decision, crossing my fingers he would get back, and it just didn't happen.
I like it. Joe was saying, don't be afraid to pair wide receivers. If I can pair Collins and Dell or Watson and Reed, he will.
Yeah, I think there's a time and place for it. It's just not something that I really wanted to deal with in this exercise.
In best ball, I will go through and create entire teams of stacks.
Derek has been doing the Houston stack of late in his best ball drafts, and it's been real fun to see how successful he's been in those.
I actually did put together a best ball draft where I got Stroud, Diggs, Collins, Dell, and Schultz all on the same best ball roster. And so yeah, that type of deal makes a lot of sense. I don't want to have to try and pick and choose on whether I'm starting Nico Collins or Tank Dell on a week, right? For my season-long type of deal.
Yeah, do we not remember that from last year between Dell and Collins?
Mhm.
Neither one of them went off on the same week. I think
Right.
once they both had the same week where they hit. Other than that, it was bouncing back and forth until Dell went down, and then Nico took over there at the back end of the year. But it was not fun picking between those two. The number of questions we answered on our Friday night show that
Oh,
Derek and I
man.
do between Nico Collins and Tank Dell was mind-blowing that people had those two stacked together.
I'm also still like scorned from when I had, was it Singletary and Moss when they both were on Buffalo? I know wide receiver to running back, but like I had both of those guys, and it was a nightmare to try and pick which one was going to be the guy that week. Like, I hated that season so much. I ended up winning the league that year, but I hated that season so much because I had to figure out which guy it was going to be. And that was just such a headache. It was just such unnecessary stress that I had to deal with. So that's why I try to avoid having dudes from the same team. I try to diversify as much as possible from the same team at the same position.
Right. No, I like it. Chandler saying, am I putting too much thought into this? Swift's got 2 snaps in week 1 preseason. First snap of the game, sit out a while, then came back in for a screen pass. That's it. Herbert had 14 snaps, plus got all the goal line work. Homer got all the third down work, and his coach came in over from Seattle. Plus, they have Johnson. Feel like they have too many mouths to feed. Plus, having 3 stud wide receivers and a rookie QB, thinking about selling Swift, but I don't know what to sell for. Thoughts? I think you're overthinking this one.
Yeah, I would tell you to put very, very little stock into preseason. What is that, week 2 for them? I think just this is, as I started the show off saying, this is the weekend to pay attention. This, I think, is going to be what we can expect. So don't sell now. Don't freak out now. See what they do this weekend in their 4 or 5 series that the offense that the ones get. And then maybe you can freak out, but it's just relax for now.
But not only that, right? But you saw the screen pass that he came in for on that one. Like he'll be on the field more than what you certainly saw on that one. And that screen pass and the ability to kind of create there, that's the dynamic type of playmaking ability that DeAndre Swift can give you in that one, right? Like
there's a reason they only wanted him on the field for those snaps.
Correct. Yeah, they're saving him for the season.
If Khalil Herbert goes down, they can pivot and it's not a problem.
Right.
But you follow the money, and they paid DeAndre Swift well to come in. He showed last year in Philly that he can handle lead back roles, right? Like he's not going to be the true alpha that, Zeke Elliott was for all those years in Dallas, but DeAndre Swift can be a very solid 1A, and that's what he's going to be in Chicago.
Yep. So, SJ over on YouTube saying Mike Evans never gets his respect. Going back to that one.
I love Evans in the third.
I agree with that. But the man's still going in the 3rd round. Like, it's not. I agree, though. He's a 1,000-yard receiver every year. He's a 1,000-yard receiver every year he's been in the league. Like, death taxes, Mike Evans gets 1,000 yards receiver.
Right.
Like,
last year when he was like a 7th round pick, I would absolutely agree with you. But that ADP is rebounded back to about where he would be coming off, or should be coming off the board.
And I think that was the 7th round pick was more of a product of who was going to be his quarterback, right?
Right.
It was no longer going to be Tom Brady. But what we found is that it doesn't matter who's throwing the football to Mike Evans. He's going to get 1,000 yards. He'll find the end zone a handful of times.
Right.
Like that's just what he does.
Joe saying HN will go down at some point. Mostert's old, but he'll still bet on Mostert.
Joe, I like that comment, Joe, except for while Mostert is old, there's a ton of tread on those tires. I went back and looked. Like Mostert's been in the league for a while, but he hasn't really played a ton.
Right. There's a whole lot of help.
Injury, be it from bouncing around from team to team. He couldn't land on a team to start, and then he was injured, off injured when he was with San Francisco. and he's really found his stride here. So yes, he's old, but his legs still have a ton of game miles on him because he hasn't played all that much.
He is the best Purdue running back to play in the state of Florida professionally since.
Oh, Purdue running backs, not something I am super high on. So
You'll know this name, I promise you.
Professionally in the state of Florida. So either Miami or Jacksonville. Purdue running. Frank Gore? For Frank Gore playing Purdue? No.
Mike Allstott.
There we go. Yep.
What a guy.
Him and Warwick Dunn.
There you go.
Yep.
A little thunder and lightning back there.
Yeah, that was a fun team.
And then Terry saying that Brock Purdy needs some more love as well.
As far as criminally underrated, I think that's where Terry was going with criminally underrated in the draft.
Yep.
So I don't disagree with the Brock Purdy take.
Yeah.
And I think outside of Caleb Williams, okay, like I don't get why we value Williams over Purdy. Who else are you putting Purdy over right now that you just go, yep, Purdy's going to beat him out?
Yeah, nobody.
It's a hard sell. He's going to be there at the end of the year, but man, is it hard to get my brain to think that.
Well, he's going to be there at QB 10, 11, 12, like in that back end QB1 range. But, it's going to, one of these guys that are taken ahead of him will certainly probably fall outside of that. It's like we see that every year. Injuries happen, things like that.
It happens, right? But as we're ranking it,
right.
And that's just my counter. That's just my counterpoint is, okay, fine. Purdy's undervalued. Who do we need to move him above? Like
Terry says he'll put him over Dak. Not a chance.
Go for it, man.
Terry.
You start a league with Purdy, I'll start a league with Dak. We'll see how that shakes out.
So, I like it. All righty. Any thoughts as far as kind of the mock here and the teams and some strategies certainly played out there, right? Like Team 10 certainly went with the wide receiver heavy.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, we got Alex kind of going the hero RB approach, a little bit of a modified deal to it. But what are our thoughts here on the mock and how some of these things kind of played out?
Is there a team that you would rather, if you could trade for that team, would you have one? I'm trying to look. Team 5 looks like they did really well. Jefferson, Henry, Diggs, Mahomes, McBride as your first 5 picks. Not bad. I'll tell you, when we were going, I'll let you guys kind of think about if there's a team that you like other than your own. When we were going through it, and man, round 2 there, I'm at Devontae Adams. Round 3, I'm at Nico Collins at the turn. There was a lot of discipline that it took to try and stay there. I was not thrilled after I made pick 3. I was not thrilled with what I had, but I thought that I could get it back in rounds 4, 5, 6, and 7. And I think I did okay. I think I had to settle for Odunze and take your pick. It's either the last pick of the 6th, the first pick of the 7th for Dak. But I felt like that was a pick that kind of helped me get back on track. Waiting on quarterback to get Dak helped me kind of get back on track.
I could see that, yeah. I probably would have taken Evans over Nico there, but yeah, it's just kind of tomato. Probably would have
too.
Yeah, I think the reason I did that was because I like that Houston offense, but I do see your point. I do see the point, and I think that's a very fair criticism of that selection.
And then kind of in rounds 4 or 5, I probably would have taken T. Higgins over one of those running backs, and then taken a Raheem Mostert in the 6th or 7th there.
I'll tell you the one that I actually do kind of regret is Devin Singletary instead of Christian Watson.
I could see that.
I didn't really realize that Christian Watson was still available when I made that selection.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I think what throws me off with some of these teams is where they took their second quarterback and what they gave up on to get it.
Yeah.
And again, it's
tough.
AI generated, so it's a little bit more difficult, and I understand that. So, but I don't know. Like I'd totally go to battle with my team.
Yeah.
Like I would be happy starting the year with that as my roster. Tweaks and trades and everything else, who knows? But to start a season, I'd just line that up and feel okay.
I think at some point, Team 10 is gonna have to make a trade with somebody.
For what?
A little bit more running back help, because Jerome Ford likely
You
loses
can
it.
trade with Team 3.
Well, so that's what I was saying. Team 3. Well, Team 3 also needs some running back help, as they have 2 on their roster. But they have, like, Team 10's got the pieces that they could trade away to get decent running back help. Team 2 has plenty of running backs, not any that I think anybody would want, but
Yeah.
I certainly would listen to a trade offer from Team 10 for one of those 4 wide receivers that they have.
Yeah. Team 4 had an interesting type of deal where, they ended up going both QB early and tight end early. Yeah, I think that they probably could have done a little bit better job pairing up some running backs there later on.
They suffered at running back.
Right. But
Well, yeah, they only have one starting back.
right.
Yeah.
Had they taken Vontae Williams over Jonathan Brooks right there, right? Like that drastically changes the kind of the look and feel of that team right off the bat. So, but yeah, that's another interesting one there. Cool. Any other thoughts on the mock or some of these teams and how some of these strategies kind of played out here?
No, I mean, I think, like you said, I think we saw one, right? Like I shouldn't say actively, throughout the draft, I made the decision that I was going to start waiting on quarterback. I was eyeballing Purdy before Purdy went off the board. And then I was semi eyeballing Tua, and he went right before me. And then at that point, I said, I'm going to wait till the next round. Like you guys, talked about the coin flip there between Sutton and Dobbs. And then I just decided to wait on quarterback and call it good. But, a little bit RB heavy to begin with, right? 3 out of the first 4. Was I the only team to do that? I was.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So only team to go 3 out of the first 4 at running back. I don't know that I dislike it, but I don't want Malik Neighbors as my number 2 wide receiver. I would have taken Michael Pittman had he had slipped. I was really hoping that Derek was going to be getting cute somewhere and let Cup continue to fall, because I would have absolutely snatched Cup up to go with DK. But I don't want Neighbors. Say Flowers, maybe. And then I made an active decision to gamble, hoping that, T. Higgins ADP would force him down to me, and that didn't happen, which is fine. I got Amari Cooper. I'm happy with that.
Yeah. Awesome. Alex, any final thoughts on the mocking?
No. This was a good exercise, I think, for me to exercise some patience on quarterback, which I think is something that I have to, it's a mindset that I have to change when I go into normal drafts and not home league drafts. I've got to be patient on quarterback. And I think that a lot of that can serve a lot of people well. Look at what Kevin did. And yeah, I went Dak in the 7th, but I feel like Dak in the 7th is a decent spot there. But you can wait until the 11th and still end up with a Kirk Cousins and a Matt Stafford. You can wait until
or Lawrence, right? Baker,
Lawrence,
Cousins, and Lawrence all went there. I don't know about Justin Herbert. Like that offense scares me a little bit this year. But Baker, Cousins, and Lawrence in the 11th.
Rogers.
I don't know that any of us would have a problem with them, right? Yeah, and you still left Will Levis, Gino, obviously Daniel Jones. We kind of talked about. We still left guys on the board who can play. So if Matt Stafford or Kirk Cousins or whoever, Aaron Rodgers, if any of them have an injury, older quarterbacks is why I'm kind of singling these guys out, right? Kind of the old guys in the room. If they have an injury, there's still solid talent there that you can pick up and plug in.
Yeah.
Right. Awesome. Well, guys, that's going to take us down here to the end of it. Any final thoughts out there for the viewers and listeners?
I don't think so. Like, obviously, hit us up with your questions. It is draft season, right? There's going to be tons of time where you're on the clock, especially if you have a slower draft and you kind of have an opportunity. But hit up some best balls, hit up your redrafts, all this fun stuff. Like, enjoy this process. Drafts are so fun, right? Just to kind of being able to go through it and see how everybody else is thinking about players and maybe some decisions that they make, and you go, "There's no way I would do that for one reason or another." Or I mean, obviously the three of us spend so much time together that it is kind of interesting having us this far apart, because I think next week we intentionally need the three of us to be together.
Yeah.
And just to kind of see how that kind of plays out, because we do have a very similar process. And I think the three of us together would simulate a home league type draft where you really know the guys that you're drafting with.
Yeah. I think that's the way we do it then. So awesome. Alex, any final thoughts out there?
No. Enjoy. I say no, and then I'm going to give you a final thought. Enjoy the weekend of football. This is, as I mentioned, this is the one to pay attention to, and hopefully you guys get to kick back, relax, and enjoy a few snaps of football, of somewhat ones of good versus good football for a little bit.
Absolutely. I like it. All right, guys. Well, that's going to do it for us tonight. You can find us on all those socials, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all the places at Good Old Boys FF. Head over to YouTube, click that like button, hit that subscribe button, help out this independent podcast that way. But that's going to do it for us. He's Kevin. He's Alex. I'm Derek. Have a good one. Be safe. Toodaloos.